Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this before you answer it. Have you ever looked over at your partner while they were on their phone and felt something shift in your spirit, but you couldn't quite explain why? Not because you saw anything obvious, not because you had proof, but because something about the way they were smiling, the way they were engaged, the way they were locked in, it just didn't feel like it had anything to do with you. And that feeling right there, that quiet, uncomfortable, hard to name feeling, that's what we're talking about today. So, welcome back to Hearts Wine from Hearts Distractions. I'm your host, and if you're new here, this is the space where we get real about relationships, the messy parts, the beautiful parts, and the parts people don't always want to say out loud because love isn't always soft and romantic. Sometimes it's confusing, sometimes it's triggering, and sometimes it has you questioning your own reality while someone else is telling you you're doing too much. In today's conversation, this one is going to hit home for a lot of people. We're talking about something that has quietly become one of the biggest relationships disruptors of this generation, and that is social media behavior. Now, not full-blown cheating, not someone getting caught in a hotel room. I'm talking about the gray area. The it's not that serious area, the we're just friends area, the likes, the comments, the DMs, the reactions, the conversations that somehow feel a little too personal, but not enough to be called cheating, at least not out loud. So let's go ahead and ask the question that's been sitting in the back of your mind, shall we? Is your partner cheating or just too friendly online? Because here's the thing nobody wants to admit. Boundaries in relationships today look very different than they used to. What one person calls harmless, another person experiences as disrespect. What one person sees as social, another person feels as betrayal. And somewhere in the middle of all of that is where trust starts to crack. And let me be very clear about something before we go any further. Some of you listening right now are not crazy. You're not insecure. You're not overthinking. You're responding to behavior that doesn't align with how you want to be loved, respected, and prioritized. But at the same time, some of us have also normalized behaviors that blur lines we never really defined in the first place. I know I'm getting controversial already. So now you're in relationships trying to figure out what's okay, what's not, what's disrespectful, what's harmless, and what actually counts as cheating in a world where everything is just one click away. So, in today's episode, we're going to unpack all of that. We're going to talk about micro cheating, emotional boundaries, social media addiction, generational differences, red flags, and most importantly, what you should actually do when something doesn't feel right. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about what your partner is doing. It's about what you're willing to tolerate, what you're willing to question, and what you're finally ready to address. So get comfortable because this conversation, it might challenge you, it might validate you, and for some of you, it might wake you all the way up. So grab those glasses because I got my glass of wine. Get your tea, your water, whatever it is you feel that's going to soothe you during this conversation because it's going to get real tonight. So, can we get into it? Yes, we can. All right. So, let's go ahead and step into the gray area. The place where people start getting real uncomfortable, real defensive, and real creative with their explanations. We're talking about micro cheating. Now, I already know some of y'all just rolled your eyes like, here we go with these made up terms. But stay with me, because just because something doesn't have a dramatic name like affair doesn't mean it isn't causing real damage. So, micro-cheating is basically any behavior that crosses emotional or relational boundaries without necessarily becoming physical. So no, your partner might not be in somebody else's bed, but they might be a little too comfortable in somebody else's inbox. And listen, let's not act brand new. We all know the difference between being friendly and being a little too invested. Because being friendly sounds like, hey, how you doing? Hope all is well. While being too friendly sounds like "Good morning, beautiful," and it ain't even your partner. Like, sir, who are you talking to at 7:32 a.m. with that level of enthusiasm? Because you barely speak before your coffee at home. Now, all of a sudden, you're the morning motivational speaker in somebody else's DMs. Let's be serious. And here's the thing. Research in marriage and family therapy actually shows that emotional betrayal can hurt just as deeply as physical cheating. In some cases, even more. Because physical cheating might be a moment, but emotional cheating, that's consistency. That's attention. That's energy being redirected over time. That's you choosing to show up somewhere else instead of where you're committed. And that's what makes micro cheating so dangerous, because it's sneaky. It looks like constantly liking one specific person's photos, and not just regular photos. We're talking about the "I know exactly what I'm doing in this picture" photos. It looks like leaving comments that got a little extra seasoning on them. You know what I'm talking about. You know, those fire emojis, those emojis with the smiley face with the heart eyes, that make you snap. And then you're like, okay, chief, relax. It also sounds like having ongoing conversations in DMs that your partner knows absolutely nothing about. And it looks like sharing personal thoughts, feelings, frustrations, basically giving someone else emotional access to you that your partner should have. And let's talk about this one right here, because this is where people start getting quiet. Entertaining someone you know is attracted to you. Yeah, we're going there. Because some of y'all will say, "I can't control who likes me." And you're right, you can't control who's attracted to you, but you can control how you respond to it. And you can control whether you feed it or shut it down. Let's be clear. Let's get honest. Because some people aren't confused about the attention they're getting because they're enjoying it. And that's where the line starts to blur. Now, here's the real test I want you to think about. And don't try to skip past this part either. If your partner was sitting right next to you, looking directly at your phone while you were having these interactions, would you still do it the same way? Would you still send that message? Would you still like that picture? Would you still laugh that hard at that comment? Or would you suddenly get real private, real quiet, real, "let me turn my brightness down"? Okay, exactly. Because the moment your behavior changes when your partner is present, that's your conscience tapping you on the shoulder like, "Hey, you might be doing a little too much." And I know somebody listening right now is saying, "But it's not that deep." Whew, okay, well, let's talk about that. If it's not that deep, why hide it? If it's not that serious, why delete it? If it's harmless, why would your partner feel hurt if they saw it? See, the issue isn't always the action itself, it's the intention behind it and the secrecy surrounding it. Because transparency doesn't need to be explained, but secrecy always does. And let me say this too, because I want to be fair. Micro cheating doesn't always come from a place of wanting to hurt your partner. Sometimes it comes from boredom. Sometimes it comes from needing validation. Sometimes it comes from feeling disconnected in your relationship and not knowing how to fix it. But just because the intention isn't malicious doesn't mean the impact isn't real. Because at the end of the day, your partner isn't just reacting to what you did, they're reacting to how it made them feel. And feeling like you had to compete for your partner's attention with strangers on the internet, that will break trust real quick. So now that we've decided what micro cheating looks like, the real question becomes, are you dealing with a partner who's crossing the lines, or are you realizing you might have been tiptoeing on it yourself? Don't answer too fast. Trust me, we've got way more to unpack here. Now, let's talk about what's really going on underneath all of this, because this isn't just about likes, comments, and DMs. That's just the surface. The real issue, attention, energy, and where your emotional investment is actually going. Because let's be honest, social media didn't just give us a way to connect. It gave us access. Access to people, access to validation, access to attention at any time of the day or night. And if you're not careful, that access can slowly start replacing the connection we're supposed to be building at home. And listen, I'm not judging because social media is designed to pull you in. Every notification, every like, every comment, it triggers a dopamine release in your brain. That little feel-good chemical that says, ooh, baby, somebody sees me. Somebody likes me. Let me go back and check again. Now, here's the problem. When you start getting that validation outside your relationship, it can become easier to go there instead of doing the work inside your relationship. So instead of having a real conversation with your partner about how you feel, you go laugh in somebody else's comments. Instead of addressing the distance between you and your partner, you go respond to somebody sliding in your DMs. Instead of fixing what's missing at home, you start feeding what feels good online. And before you know it, you're emotionally showing up for strangers more than you're showing up for your partner. But let's make this real for a second, shall we? Have you ever been sitting next to your partner and they're just scrolling, laughing, smiling, fully engaged, and you're sitting there like, okay, what's funny? And they hit you with nothing. Nothing? You over there giggling like you just watched a whole stand-up comedy special by Kevin Hart and it's nothing? Meanwhile, you've been trying to get a conversation out of them all day and getting one-word responses like it's a text message from a customer service bot. Now all of a sudden, you got jokes. Yeah, okay. And that right there is where emotional disconnection starts creeping in. Because it's not always about cheating. It's about misplaced energy. And according to research published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, higher levels of social media use are associated with increased relationship dissatisfaction, more conflict, and decreased emotional intimacy between partners. Translation? The more time and energy you invest outside your relationship, the less fulfilled your relationship starts to feel. And let me break that down even further because I want you to really catch this. Your relationship doesn't just break because one big moment happened. It breaks in small moments. It breaks when you choose your phone over eye contact. It breaks when you laugh with someone else but stay silent with your partner. It breaks when you're emotionally available for the world but unavailable at home. And here's the part that people don't want to admit. Sometimes it feels easier to connect with people online because there's no responsibility attached to it at all. You don't have to show up consistently. You don't have to work through conflict. You don't have to deal with real life stress. You just show up, get attention, feel good, and log off. Meanwhile, your partner is sitting there dealing with the real version of you, the tired version, the stressed version, the distracted version. So now the person online is getting your best energy and your partner is getting what's left. Whew, yeah, let that sit for a second because some of us aren't intentionally choosing someone else over our partner, but our behavior is saying otherwise. And I know somebody listening right now is thinking, okay, but it's not like I'm emotionally invested in these people. And maybe you're not. But emotional disconnection doesn't always come from deep feelings. Sometimes it comes from repeated distraction because attention is intimacy. Let me say that again, because I don't think some of y'all heard it. Attention is intimacy. Where your attention goes, your connection goes. So if your attention is constantly being pulled outside your relationship, don't be surprised when your relationship starts to feel distant. And then here comes the confusion. Because now you're sitting there thinking, why don't we feel as close anymore? And your partner is sitting there thinking, why do I feel alone when I'm not alone? And neither one of you is saying what's really going on. So instead of addressing it, you scroll more, you disconnect more, you avoid more. And slowly, the relationship starts to drift. Not because of one big betrayal, but because of 1,000 small distractions. And listen, I'm not saying social media is the enemy, but unmanaged behavior on social media, that can absolutely become a silent relationship killer. So now the question becomes, are you using social media or is social media using your relationship as a distraction from what needs to be fixed? Yeah, we're getting real uncomfortable up in here now, and we're not even done yet. All right, can I tell y'all a story? And I want you to really listen because some of you, this isn't just a story. it's going to feel a little too familiar. So there's this couple. We're going to call them Maya and Jordan. Now, Maya and Jordan had what most people would call a good relationship. They weren't perfect, but they were solid. They communicated. They spent time together. They laughed. They supported one another. No major issues. No cheating history. Nothing that would make you look at them and think, oh yeah, they're headed for trouble. Everything looked good until it didn't. It started small, and when I say small, I mean so small that most people would have ignored it. Maya noticed that Jordan kept liking this one girl's picture on Instagram. Now, at first, she brushed it off because let's be real, people like pictures all day long. It's social media, right? That's what people do. She told herself, I'm not about to be that person. I'm not insecure. It's not that deep. But then she started noticing it wasn't just random. It was consistent. Every post, every story, every time this girl popped up, Jordan was there. Now, Maya still didn't say anything because she didn't want to seem like she was overreacting. And let's pause right there. Because how many of us have ignored something that bothered us just so we wouldn't come off as too much? Exactly. So she stayed quiet. But then it escalated. The likes turned into comments, y'all. Nothing crazy at first. Just little things like 2 fire emojis or you snapped. And listen, on the surface, that still doesn't scream cheating, right? It's just emojis. It's just words. But here's the thing about behavior. Patterns tell the truth that words try to hide. Because now it's not just interaction. It's intentional. And Maya started feeling it. That little shift in her chest. That feeling that something wasn't sitting right. So one day, she finally brought it up, y'all. Yes, she did. And Jordan hit her with the classic line. You're doing too much. It's not that serious. That's just my friend. There it is. The 3 phrases that have saved people from accountability since the beginning of time. It's not that serious. You're overthinking. That's just my friend. Now let me pause right here and say this. Just because someone says something isn't serious doesn't mean it isn't significant. Because significance is determined by impact, not intention. So Maya, trying to keep the peace, let it go again. But then came the part that changed everything. One night, Jordan fell asleep with his phone in his hand. Now listen, I know some of y'all just sat up a little straighter like, okay, here we go. Well, Maya wasn't the type to go through phones. That wasn't her thing. But something in her spirit, y'all, said, just take a look. And when she opened that phone, it wasn't just likes anymore. It wasn't just comments. It wasn't conversations. Long conversations. Good morning texts, good night texts, inside jokes, personal conversations. The kind of conversations that looked a little too familiar because they were the same type of conversations Jordan used to have with her. Woo! Now let me ask you this, because this is where it gets real. At what point did it stop being harmless? Was it the likes, the comments, the consistency, or was it the moment emotional energy shifted from the relationship to someone else? Because here's the truth. Cheating doesn't always start with intention. It starts with access. It starts with attention. Sometimes it starts with a like. And before you even realize what's happening, boundaries that were never clearly defined get crossed quietly. And now somebody's feelings are involved. Now somebody's expectations are involved. Now somebody is getting a version of your partner that you feel like you're losing. And the worst part? When Maya confronted Jordan about the messages, he said, it didn't mean anything. Woo, y'all. And maybe to him it didn't, but to Maya, it meant everything. Because now she wasn't just questioning his actions. She was questioning their entire connection. She was questioning why someone else was getting his attention, his energy, his consistency, while she was sitting right there feeling overlooked. And that's the part people don't talk about enough. It's not always about the other person. It's about what your partner is no longer giving to you. So now let me bring this back to you, because I don't want you to just hear this story. I want you to reflect on it. Have you ever ignored something because it seemed too small to address? Have you ever told yourself it's not that serious just to avoid conflict? Or have you ever been on the other side of this, doing things that felt harmless to you, but would probably look real different if your partner saw it through their eyes? Yeah, because sometimes the problem isn't that we don't see the signs, it's that we convince ourselves they don't matter until they do. All right, now it's time to get into the part that makes people a little uncomfortable, because we're not talking in theory anymore. We're talking about real life behavior, red flags, and not the cute little ones you try to decorate and ignore like they're part of the aesthetics. No, I'm talking about the ones you see, feel, question, and then talk yourself out of addressing. Because let's be honest, some of y'all don't miss red flags. You just rename them. You call it, they're just friendly. You call it, they didn't mean it. You call it, I don't want to argue. Meanwhile, your intuition is over there screaming like, hello, we not going to talk about this? So let's go ahead and break down some red flags when it comes to this whole too friendly online situation. And I want you to listen without trying to defend anybody, including yourself. First red flag, sudden privacy with their phone. Now, let's be clear. I'm not saying your partner shouldn't have privacy. Everybody deserves personal space. But there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. Privacy is, I trust you, but this is mine. Secrecy is, let me turn my phone away, lower my brightness, switch apps real quick, and suddenly lock it like it's holding national security information. Like, why your phone got more protection than your relationship? Be serious. If your partner used to be open and now suddenly they're moving like a secret agent every time a notification pops up, that's a shift. And shifts matter. Second red flag, they get defensive when you ask simple questions. Now listen, I'm not talking about interrogation mode. I'm talking about normal, hey, what's that type of questions. And instead of a simple answer you get, why you always questioning me? You don't trust me? You're doing too much. Oh, so now I'm doing too much for noticing something that feels off? Interesting. Because people who aren't doing anything questionable don't usually react like they're being accused of a crime. They don't turn a question into a full-blown argument. They don't flip it back on you to avoid answering. That's called deflection. And deflection is a red flag's favorite outfit. For some people it looks good on, more likely it don't look good on nobody. So I wasn't going to go the opposite way on that one for y'all. Third red flag, emotional energy is going somewhere else. This one right here, this is the one people miss the most because it's not loud, it's not obvious, it's subtle. It's the way your partner stops sharing things with you. It's the way conversations become surface level. It's the way they seem more engaged with their phone than with you. And you can feel it. You can feel when someone is no longer pouring into you the way they used to. But instead of addressing it, a lot of people start questioning themselves like, am I tripping? Or are we just going through a phase? No. Sometimes it's not a phase. Sometimes that energy has been redirected and you need to call it what it is. Fourth red flag. They're more concerned with how they look online than how they show up at home. Now listen, I'm all for looking good, posting your pictures, feeling confident. Do your thing, boo. But if your partner is putting more effort into impressing strangers online than maintaining connection with you in real life, that's a problem. Because why you got a whole photo shoot personality online, but at home you giving don't talk to me, I'm tired vibes? So Instagram gets the highlight reel and I get the behind the scenes footage. I know some of y'all be thinking that. Okay, got it. Fifth red flag, gaslighting you when you express discomfort. And this is where it gets serious. Because now it's not just about the behavior. It's about how they respond to your feelings. You say, that made me uncomfortable. And they say, you're insecure. You say that crossed the boundary for me. And they say you're overreacting. You say that didn't sit right with me. And they say you always find something to complain about. Woo, if I was a better storyteller, y'all would have picked that up right there. But let me tell you something real quick. Being aware of your boundaries does not make you insecure. Wanting respect does not make you controlling. And expressing discomfort does not make you too much. It makes you honest. And the right person will hear you, not silence you. And here's the truth that I need you to really sit with. Red flags are not confusing. We just become confused when we don't want to accept what they mean. Because deep down, most of the time, you already know when something isn't right. You feel it. You just don't always trust yourself enough to stand on it. And listen, I'm not saying every red flag means your partner's cheating, but I am saying this. Repeated behavior that makes you feel disrespected, disconnected, or dismissed, it's not something you're supposed to keep tolerating just to keep the peace. Because peace that requires you to stay silent is not peace, it's suppression. So now, I want you to ask yourself this. Don't rush to answer either. Have you been noticing red flags, or have you been explaining them away? Yeah, we're getting into the real stuff now, aren't we? Okay. Can we get a little deeper? Can we go a little deeper? Because everything we've talked about so far, micro-cheating, social media behavior, red flags, it didn't just come out of nowhere. A lot of us is rooted in with what we've seen, what we were taught, and what we've normalized over time. Let's talk about generational patterns, shall we? Because whether people want to admit it or not, the way we define loyalty, respect, and boundaries in relationships is heavily influenced by what we grew up watching. Some of us grew up in households where cheating was obvious but tolerated. You saw one parent step out and the other one stay. You saw disrespect, but nobody addressed it. You saw silence become survival. So now as adults, when something feels off in your relationship, your first instinct isn't to confront it. It's to cope with it. It's to say, well, at least they're not doing what my parents did. And just like that, your standards get lowered without you even realizing it. Then you got another group of people who grew up seeing relationships that looked perfect on the outside, but had no real emotional depth. Everything was about appearances. Keep it together. Don't embarrass the family. Don't put your business out there. So now you're in relationships where things look good on social media, but feel empty in real life. And instead of addressing the disconnection, you maintain the image. Because you were taught that how it looks matters more than how it feels. And now, here comes social media, adding a whole new layer to all this because older generations didn't have to deal with this level of access. There was no Instagram, no TikTok, no constant stream of options and attention. If somebody cheated back then, they had to actually go outside and do it. Now, all you need is Wi-Fi and a little bit of curiosity. And don't let it be late at night, because something about 11:47 p.m. turns people into philosophers, therapists, and professional flirts all at the same time. All of a sudden, it's, you up? Sir, go to sleep. Now, let's talk about generational differences real quick, because this matters. For a lot of older generations, cheating was very black and white. Physical interaction equals cheating. Anything else? Not really. But for younger generations, us millennials and Gen Zs, we've expanded that definition. Because now we understand emotional connection differently. We understand that intimacy isn't just physical. It's mental, emotional, digital. So for us, a conversation can feel like betrayal. Consistency can feel like cheating. Emotional investment outside the relationship, that absolutely counts. And that's where a lot of conflict comes in relationships, especially when partners come from different backgrounds or different belief systems. Because one person is saying it's not cheating, and the other person is saying, but it feels like it. And here's the truth. Both people are responding based on what they've learned. But just because something was normalized doesn't mean it was healthy. Let me say that again. Just because something was normalized does not mean it was healthy. And this is where we have to start doing the work, unlearning. Because some of y'all were taught not to question your partner. not to speak up about discomfort, not to set boundaries because it might cause conflict. So now you're in relationships accepting things that don't align with who you are today. And then you wonder why you feel disconnected, frustrated, or even resentful. It's because your standards are evolving, but your behavior hasn't caught up yet. And let me say something else too, because I want to balance this out. Some people grew up in environments where trust was constantly broken. So now they walk into relationships already on guard, already questioning, already analyzing, already preparing for disappointment. So when social media behavior comes into play, it doesn't take much to trigger those feelings. And now everything feels like a threat. So now we've got two people in a relationship, one person who may be too relaxed about boundaries and another person who may be hyper aware of them. And both of them are trying to figure out what's normal. I know that's a setup right there, because without clear communication, without shared understanding, without defined boundaries, you're going to keep clashing. Not because you don't care about each other, but because you were taught differently. So here's the real question I want you to sit with. Are your relationship boundaries based on what you truly believe is respectful? Or are they based on what you've been conditioned to tolerate? Yeah, because a lot of us aren't struggling with our partners. We're struggling with unlearning what we were taught about love and how it was supposed to look like. And listen, this isn't about blaming your past. It's about recognizing it so you can grow beyond it. Because you don't have to repeat what you saw. You don't have to accept what hurt you. And you definitely don't have to stay silent just because that's what you were taught. So now that we've unpacked where these behaviors and beliefs come from, we've got to go even deeper, y'all. Because the next question is going to challenge you on a whole personal level. Y'all ready? All right. Now that this is the part of the conversation where we got to slow down just a little bit, because it's real easy to point fingers outward. But now we're about to turn that mirror inward too. Because everything that feels uncomfortable in a relationship isn't always coming from your partner. Sometimes it's coming from what you've experienced. Sometimes it's coming from what you've been through. And sometimes it's coming from what you haven't healed from yet. Now, don't get defensive on me. Just stay with me. Because there's a difference between intuition and insecurity. And if you don't know the difference, you'll either ignore red flags or create problems where there aren't any. And neither one of those is healthy. Let's start here. Intuition is calm. It's steady. It doesn't panic. It knows. It's that quiet voice that says something isn't right. Not loud, not chaotic, just clear. Insecurity, on the other hand, insecurity is loud. It's anxious, it overthinks, it creates scenarios, runs full investigations, builds entire storylines off of one like and a half of a comment. Insecurity will have you on your partner's page, their friend's page, their friend's cousin's page. Now you're 3 clicks away from somebody's 2018 vacation photos like you're solving a mystery. Be honest, some of y'all don't need evidence. You need Wi-Fi and time. But here's the tricky part. Sometimes, and I do mean sometimes, your insecurity was born from real experiences. You've been lied to before. You've been cheated on before. You've been made to feel like you weren't enough before. So now when something even slightly resembles that feeling, your body reacts before your logic has a chance to catch up. And that doesn't make you crazy. It makes you human. But it also means you have to do the work of understanding your triggers so you don't project past pain onto present situations that might not be the same. Now let's flip it. Because some of y'all have been calling your intuition insecurity because somebody convinced you that your feelings were the problem. Let's talk about that. If you feel uncomfortable with your partner entertaining someone else, that doesn't automatically mean you're insecure. If you feel disrespected by certain behaviors, that doesn't mean you're overreacting. If something consistently doesn't sit right with you, that's worth paying attention to. Because intuition doesn't need a full explanation. It recognizes patterns. It picks up on energy shifts. It notices when something changes, even when you can't fully explain why. And this is where things get real in relationships. Because now you got to ask yourself, am I reacting to what's actually happening right now? Or am I reacting to what this reminds me of? Whew, let that sit right there. Because if you don't take the time to separate the two, you'll either ignore something you shouldn't tolerate or confront something that isn't actually there. And both can damage your relationship. Now let's add another layer to this, because this is important. Your partner's response to your concern will tell you everything you need to know. Everything. Because even if you're triggered, even if you're still healing, a healthy partner will respond with understanding, not dismissal. They'll say, okay, I hear you. Let's talk about it. Not, here you go again. They'll create safety, not defensiveness. They'll work with you, not against you. And let me say this too, because this is where accountability comes in on both sides. If you are aware that you have triggers, it's your responsibility to communicate them, not weaponize them. You cannot expect your partner to read your mind, and you also can't use your past as an excuse to control their present behavior. But at the same time, your partner cannot use your healing process as a reason to dismiss your feelings. I know, that balance right there, that's where a lot of relationships struggle. So here's what I want you to take from this segment. Not everything you feel is insecurity, but not everything you feel is intuition either. The goal is to understand yourself well enough to know the difference. Because when you do, you stop second-guessing yourself. You stop over-explaining yourself, and you start standing on what you feel, clearly, calmly, and confidently. So now, let me ask you this. When something doesn't sit right in your relationship, do you trust yourself enough to address it? Or do you talk yourself out of it to keep the peace? Yeah, because clarity doesn't come from ignoring that feeling. It comes from understanding it. All right, so now we talked about the problem. We've unpacked the behavior. We've called out the red flags. We've checked ourselves a little bit. Now let's get into what everybody really wants to know. Okay, but what do I actually do about it? Because awareness is great, but if nothing changes, you're just becoming more aware of what's hurting you. And we're not doing that. We're not sitting in confusion. We're not sitting in silence. And we're definitely not sitting in situations that make us feel small, disrespected, or disconnected. So let's talk solutions. And I want you to really hear this, because this part requires effort from both people, not just one. First things first, you have to communicate clearly and directly. And listen, I don't mean passive-aggressive hints either. I don't mean attitude. I don't mean posting subliminals on Instagram like your partner is going to decode it like a detective. No, I mean real conversation that sounds like, I noticed this and it made me feel this way. That's it. Not accusations, not yelling, not you always and you never. Because the goal is not to win an argument. The goal is to be understood. And let me add a little humor here, because some of y'all need to hear this. Your partner is not a mind reader. They're barely a good listener sometimes. Let's be real. So if you're sitting there expecting them to just know what bothered you while you're giving them silence and side eyes, yeah, that's not communication. That's emotional charades. Second, define your boundaries out loud. And I do mean out loud in conversation. Because this is where a lot of couples mess up. You're expecting your partner to respect boundaries that you never clearly communicated. So now they're over here living their life thinking everything is fine. And you're over here building a case like strike one, strike two. It's coming. Meanwhile, they didn't even know there was a game being played. Be clear. What makes you uncomfortable? What do you consider disrespectful? What crosses the line for you? Because boundaries are not universal. What one couple is okay with, another couple will absolutely not tolerate, and that's okay. But it has to be discussed. Third, establish digital respect, not control. Now, this is important because I don't want y'all confusing boundaries with control. There's a difference between saying, I need transparency and respect, and saying, Give me your passcode, your location, your screen time report, and let me scroll through your phone every night at 9 p.m. Because at that point, you're not in a relationship. You're running a surveillance program. And listen, feel like you have to monitor your partner to feel secure? That's not trust. That's anxiety with a login. What you actually want is this: a partner who behaves the same way online as they would in front of you. A partner who doesn't need to hide or explain. A partner who understands that respect doesn't change just because it's digital. Because let's be honest, some people act like the internet is a different universe. Like the rules don't apply there. It's just online. No, it's still you typing, responding, engaging. So the same respect you expect in real life should apply in digital spaces too. I'm getting real on y'all today. Fourth, rebuild trust through consistency, not words. Because let me tell you something real quick. I'm sorry without changed behavior is just a delay. That's it. It's a pause button. Because trust is not rebuilt through promises. It's rebuilt through patterns. It's rebuilt when your partner consistently shows you through their actions that they understand what hurt you and they're choosing to move differently. Not for a week, not for a few days, but consistently. Because consistency creates safety, and safety is what allows connection to continue to grow. Fifth, some of y'all not gonna like me on this one. Check yourself too. Yeah, I know somebody likes this part, but somebody definitely didn't. But we're keeping it real. Because while you're asking your partner to be accountable, you also have to ask yourself, am I communicating clearly? Am I projecting past hurt onto this situation? Am I expecting perfection instead of effort? Because healthy relationships require accountability on both sides. Not blame, not defensiveness, accountability. And lastly, be honest about what you're willing to tolerate, because this is where everything comes together. You can communicate, you can set boundaries, you can have conversations, but if nothing changes, you have a decision to make. Because staying in a situation that repeatedly hurts you while hoping it will magically improve, that's not love. That's self-abandonment. And I know that's not easy to hear, but it's necessary. Because at some point, you have to choose yourself, your peace, your standards, your emotional safety. So let me leave you with this before we move to the next part of this segment here. You don't need to control your partner to feel secure. You need a partner who makes security natural. I know. Yeah, let that sit. Let that sit, y'all. Now that we talked about solutions, it's time to stir the pot just a little bit more. Because you already know what's coming next, right? All right. Y'all already know what time it is. This is the part of the episode where we lean all the way into the uncomfortable, the debatable, the don't start nothing in my relationship type of conversations. So if you're sitting next to your partner right now, you might want to either hold their hand or pause this episode and come back later, because we're about to ask some questions that don't have easy answers. Let's start with this one. Is liking someone's photo cheating? Now, I can already hear the divide. Some of y'all are like, absolutely not. It's just a like. And others are like, why you liking that type of picture though? Because let's be honest, all likes are not created equal. Liking a graduation photo? Cool. Liking somebody's business post? Supportive. Liking your friend's birthday picture? Totally normal. But liking every single thirst trap somebody posts like you're on payroll? Now we need to talk. Because at that point, it's not casual. It's consistent. And consistency shows interest. So the real question isn't just what you're doing. It's how often you're doing it and who you're doing it with. Because patterns tell a story that one-time actions don't. All right, let's take it up a notch. Should your partner have access to your phone? Ooh, baby. Yeah, I felt that tension through the mic. Now listen, this one right here, it gets people heated. Because on one side, you got people saying, if you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem. And on the other side, you got people saying, I'm allowed to have privacy. And here's the truth, both can be valid. But let's break it down. Privacy is healthy. Secrecy is suspicious. And the difference between the two is intention. Because if your privacy only shows up when certain notifications pop up, if your privacy comes with deleted messages and locked apps, if your privacy makes your partner feel shut out instead of respected, then it might not be privacy. It might be protection of something you don't want seen. Now, at the same time, if you feel like you need to check your partner's phone to feel okay, that's not trust. That's fear trying to find reassurance. And let's be real, if you have to go looking for something, even if you don't find it, you've already lost peace. Because now you're in detective mode instead of being present in your relationship. And nobody wants to be in a relationship where they feel like they're constantly on an episode of who did what and why. All right, can we go a little deeper? Can emotional cheating hurt more than physical cheating? Now, this one right here, this is where people start getting real quiet because a lot of people will say, no, cheating is cheating. But let's really think about it. Physical cheating might be a moment, a decision, a lapse in judgment, but emotional cheating, that's time, that's conversation, that's connection, that's intentional energy being invested over and over again. That's somebody else getting your thoughts, your attention, your vulnerability. That's somebody else becoming your go-to instead of your partner. And for a lot of people, that hurts deeper because it's not just about what you did. It's about who you became with someone else. Woo, I know. We're going to keep moving because I want to throw one more in here. Can I? Because I know this one is going to stir some things up. Is it disrespectful to entertain someone who you know is attracted to you? Not date them, not cheat with them, just entertain them. You know, replying, laughing, keeping the conversation going. Now, some people will say, I'm just being nice. But let's be honest, there's a difference between being nice and being available. Because if you know someone is interested in you and you continue to engage in a way that keeps that door open, you're not confused. You're choosing. And let's call it what it is. Because sometimes people don't want to shut it down because they like the attention. They like knowing they have options. They like the ego boost. But here's the problem with that. You can't build a solid relationship while leaving doors open for distractions. Eventually, something is going to walk away. So now I want you to think about this, not just for your partner, but for yourself too. Where do you draw the line? What do you consider disrespect? What would hurt you if the roles were reversed? Because at the end of the day, your relationship isn't defined by what the internet says is okay. It's defined by what the two of you agree on, respect, and uphold. And listen, some of these questions don't have one right answer, but they do have honest ones. And if you're not having these conversations in your relationship, you're leaving space for assumptions. And assumptions, well, they will tear a relationship apart faster than the truth sometimes. All right, can we bring this thing home? I want y'all to take a breath for a second because we covered a lot today. And if you've been listening closely, not just hearing me, but really listening, then you probably felt this episode somewhere deeper than just your ears. Maybe it made you reflect. Maybe it made you uncomfortable. Maybe it confirmed something you've been trying to ignore. Or maybe it gave you the words you've been needing but didn't know how to say. And that right there, that's the purpose of this space. Because at the end of the day, the conversation was never just about social media. It was about respect. It was about boundaries. It was about attention and where that attention is being placed. Because the truth is, relationships don't usually fall apart overnight. They fade, they disconnect, they weaken in the small moments that seem insignificant at the time. The ignored feelings, the unspoken concerns, the behaviors that get brushed off as not that serious until one day it is. And I want to say this to you clearly, directly, and with no confusion. You deserve to feel secure in your relationship. You deserve to feel prioritized. You deserve to feel respected, both in public and in private. And yes, that includes online too. Because loyalty isn't just about what someone does in front of you. It's about who they choose to be when you're not looking. Whew, let that sit there. And for those of you who might be on the other side of this, who might be realizing that maybe, just maybe, you've been a little too friendly online, this is not about shame. This is about awareness. Because once you know better, you have the opportunity to do better, to show up better, to love better, to respect your partner in a way that doesn't leave room for confusion. And for those of you who have been questioning your feelings, who have been told you're too much or overthinking, let me remind you of this. The right relationship will not make you feel like you have to shrink your standards to keep the peace. The right relationship will not make you question your worth just to stay connected. The right relationship will meet you in understanding, not dismiss you into silence. Because love, real love, is not confusing. It may require work. It may require growth. It may require uncomfortable conversations, but it should never require you to constantly question where you stand. So, as you leave this episode, I want you to ask yourself one final question, not about your partner, about you. Are you in a relationship where your boundaries are respected? Or are you in a relationship where you've learned to tolerate what hurts you? Yeah, because that answer, that's where your next decision begins. And as always, thank you for sitting with me, growing with me, and being open to these conversations that don't always come easy, but are always necessary. This is Heart's Wine from Harsh Distractions, where the tears, the lessons, and the love all pour together. And whether you're sipping through joy or healing through heartbreak, just know you're not alone in this. And because you're not alone in this, I want you to go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to Heart's Wine from Heart's Distractions. Visit my website, www.aliciasdistractions.com. Purchase my poetry book, Distractions of the Heart, on Amazon. And follow me, of course, on social media, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Until next time, protect your peace, honor your standards, and never ignore what your heart is trying to tell you. Cheers.